My name is Angela Noah. I am White Mountain Apache and Oklahoma Choctaw. I'm from the Fort Apache Indian Reservation in Arizona. My tribe is located in eastern Arizona. I left the reservation in 2014. I came to Oregon for a Native American boarding school, Chemawa Indian School. That was my first time leaving the reservation, first one in my family to ever leave the reservation. But my parents decided to send me to a supportive educational environment to obtain my high school diploma. So Chemawa Indian School serves Native youth, 9th through 12th grade, who are all enrolled members in the tribes across the country. So when I arrived to Salem, because we flew into Portland, then got picked up from the school and then taken to Salem. I had never attended a boarding school that was that big. There were about 400 students. My reservation in my high school was really tiny, so it was like a culture shock to me. And on my first day of school, I was introduced to everyone, and I had a lot of friends, or a lot of folks in my class who were like, I'm from Montana, or I'm native from Alaska, I'm Ojibwe or Cree. And I was so shocked because our elders in my tribe's history teach that the Apaches were the last to surrender to the government. And so I thought that meant that Apaches were the last ones left in the United States. So I felt really proud until I showed up to Chemawa and I was like, oh, well, I guess I could still feel proud because, like, there are many of us than I thought. But it was, like, the first time I had learned that there were other natives in the country. And I think that kind of segued my intro just to the Northwest. I don't see a lot of reservations. The Warm Springs Reservation is the only one in Oregon, the biggest one. So I go there sometimes when I miss home. Being away from Arizona is hard, but I'm a second year student, a first generation student at the University of Oregon, and I'm pursuing urban planning, city designing, nonprofit management, and public policy. Because I feel that I'm very community oriented. A lot of my values as a Native American woman comes from making sure the community is looked after and okay. So I feel like that degree kind of just align with my values, and so far it's been really good. I'm also the current reigning Miss Indian University of Oregon. The program is so new, but it's a platform for young Native American students who attend U of O as a cultural ambassador. A young girl receives a sash and a crown. The bead maker and the community is still beading a crown. So that'll be shared with the community when that's finished by the end of this month, which I'm really excited. November is Native American Heritage Month, so I'm really grateful for the opportunity just to show representation here in Eugene and at my school that Natives are here, we exist, and that there's been a lot of work to make sure that the community and this country recognizes us, because there's been a long, hard history of just how we have been treated and what that means, what are the realities for us today. So I'm really lucky to share my truth and be proud of being Apache. This is my grandmother's camp dress she had made for me. The turquoise jewelry are from Arizona. And just beadwork on a medallion from an organization that I also represent. And I recently got these moccasins beaded for me last week, so they're still pretty fresh. But these are Apache moccasins made from buckskin. And yeah, this is just kind of the full attire of what Apache women in my culture wore back then. So I love to wear it in the city. I wore it on Indigenous Peoples Day last month. So I have about 14 dresses now, and this is my favorite one just because it has my school colors on it. Yeah.
So what kind of response do you get when you wander around in your native?
Yeah. So from non-natives, they like to take pictures, or they always ask my permission. I never let anyone just take pictures without my permission, but that makes me feel really excited because I love to share my culture. I get really excited when I'm out of town and I also see a fellow Native from the Native Student Union or someone wearing beaded jewelry. That makes me feel seen and excited. And we don't even have to say anything. I just know they're Native from their beaded jewelry, and it's just like a little like a what's up nod, but without actually talking, and it just feels kind of powerful for me to just be like, oh yeah, I'm not the only one here in the city. Yeah. I've been in Eugene since 2017. I was pretty homesick when I came here. It came to a point where I almost decided to leave because no one looked like me. I come from a really small reservation, but you see a lot of children running around speaking the Apache language. I always our family always had gatherings. There was ceremony. There was also free land to roam around. We'd go swimming or ride horses. It didn't feel like as restricted as a city. And Eugene is not that big, but I could feel the difference. I think one of the things that I love about being Native is the cultural ties and the teachings you receive as a young one to the land. You have a respect for it. And one of the things that I think encouraged me to stay and find a community in Eugene, I went to the Willamette River, and I learned the value of prayer when I was a really young girl. And my grandmother, she took me to one of our rivers on our reservation, and she told me, like, whenever you feel down in life, go find a river and tell the river whatever is worrying your heart and give it to the river and watch it flow away. It no longer belongs to you anymore. So that is what I did. I prayed for a Native community because I recognized that I was in a city, but I didn't know how to find that community. And I stumbled upon the Native American Student Union at the Many Nations Longhouse on my school's campus. And I was not a student at the time. I was a community support member. I worked for a nonprofit, and I took some years after Chamawa before committing to U of O, so I'm non-traditional. And so I found the Many Nations Longhouse, and right when I walked into the Longhouse, it had fry bread sale next week, and it had the time and the date and location. And fry bread is a golden fluffy bread that you put taco toppings on, and you see it sold at the powwows. And when I walked into that meeting, they were discussing the Mother's Day powwow, which is the Northwest's largest powwow. So we take a lot of pride. The students put that on. And a lot of them were my age, so it was very easy for me to make friends. But the one thing that I think humbled me and made me feel like I had found kind of like home away from home was an elder in our community. His name was Gordon, and I'm getting really emotional because Gordon is no longer with us. But he explained to me the journey of salmon, and at the time I didn't know salmon was such a huge cultural reference. For me in Arizona, it's elk, it's turkey, it's dumplings, it's bread, and so their cultural connection to food was salmon. And he had explained how salmon had these cycles and in their journeys, and they left, but in the end of their cycle they always came back home. And he was like, that's you, like, welcome home. And that made me feel just connected. That made me feel like I had found a community. And I just hung around Gordon, and he needed help around the Longhouse. I would try to contribute as much as I could. And I think that was it for me, where I just told myself, if I ever wanted to go to college, I would go to U of O because I already have community here. So that's kind of been my transition as a student now. And just remembering the mentorship and elders like Gordon, that come through the Longhouse. I've been able to make a lot of healthy relations and connections through our Thursday potluck meetings that used to be a thing before COVID. We just got a new co-directors which is just student leadership over the Native American Student Union. So it's gonna look like Zoom Thursday meetings now, but I'm just really excited for community because in the summer they were all gone, and that was pretty hard. That was really lonely for me. But I'm happy my friends are back now, and the Native Student Union is working to launch some things to celebrate Native American Heritage Month this month. So that's a good spot for me, is the Many Nations Longhouse on campus.
So do you imagine that you'll stay in Eugene after you finish school?
After I finished school, no, I went in process of applying to higher education. I'm only doing it for my people, so a lot of my friends are people I grew up with on the reservation. Our elders always told us, go get the white man's education, go get education, go to college, and come back, but don't forget your people. So that's my goal. After I'm done here at U of O, I would like to go back to my reservation and see how I can help. They're underserved, under-resourced. I actually went home a couple weeks ago, and it's just the harsh reality. Having a 2-bedroom apartment to myself gave me a lot of housing stability, which is something that I never had with my family growing up, which is a story and a really just hard thing a lot of folks on the res are experiencing right now. So it feels kind of guilty a lot of the time to have access to Eugene's like green spaces. I love biking. That is a bike path is a thing that I didn't have growing up, so having just something as simple as a bike path and a bike that has like helped me during these times with COVID. It's a healthy release for me, an outlet. But a lot of the time I feel guilty because I know that it's not like this on the reservation. And while I do carry my people with me wherever I go, it's a hard thing to carry. Sometimes it feels like walking 2 different worlds, where one, I have to be well put together and speak nicely, but on this other hand, I just hope that I'm connecting both worlds. I hope that my allies are understanding what it means to be Native and how scary it is for me, because it's hard being away from home. I'm literally the first in my family to enter these spaces and be brave and courageous about it, and no one's ever done that in my family. So I'm learning, and I'm very grateful for these experiences, but it's tough. I need spaces to communities like the Native Student Union. I need ceremony. I need access to fresh water. I need access to the land. And it was intimidating transitioning to Eugene, but I think that I just had to learn how to adapt. And I really hate saying that because I feel like Natives have constantly, that was the goal, was to adapt, to be more civilized. But a mentor had told me, when a Native knows how to speak the white man's language and still can speak their Native language, that's a double-edged sword. And I hope to be that double-edged sword to fight for my people while also helping lead allyship and non-Natives to what it looks like to help Native communities, what it looks like to bring us back into the front lines and to recognize the work that we have always been doing. So I feel like that's where I'm at in my journey now here in Eugene.
Do you feel like you have allies in the non-Native population here in Eugene?
I stumbled upon that word allyship when I joined a nonprofit here in Eugene. And this nonprofit sent a lot of youth outdoors to build trail, enter into national parks, and it was a 5-week camping crew. And they had actually reached out to Chamorro Indian School and partnered with them. So seeing Chamorro Indian School and seeing this organization here in Eugene, that felt really nice, like people wanting to help, people wanted to understand what were the things Native youth were facing and how they can help. After I was a youth on that trail crew, they then created a position for me as an inclusion coordinator. So I entered in that, and I was really young and naive at the time, really excited for change. But then I learned borderlines of tokenization and just the emotional labor. It's really funny, I think, the DEI positions created within organizations, because I always felt that they were paying me to be Native to teach them. But one of the things that they failed to recognize is it's not like after 5 p.m. when I'm clocking out, I can then turn my identity off. I can then stop being Native. No, I then have to carry the day's work at home and process it and hope that I did enough with this, teaching this organization that was all white, and me being the only Native staff there, and understanding that we had these Native youth coming through, and I feel like I'm always like this auntie role, or this, because I'm an older sister, so I always want to protect any space I enter. I want to make sure it's safe, because I do work with a lot of youth and I have siblings, and I want to make sure that they're not entering a space that's harmful. So that network, working with the nonprofit, I feel segued and opened up a lot of opportunities for me to speak at conferences, to build a Native youth crew. What does that even look like in conservation work? But that was outdoor industry-wise, and the Northwest has a whole field in that, which I was really lucky to segue into it, because anything outdoor related should be working with Indigenous people. These are their lands. So that was really fun and exciting for me. I did walk away with coworkers who, even to this day, are my best friends, who I consider sisters and aunties, who have mentored me into getting into U of O and maintaining my studies. So I feel that there has been allyship that has showed up in my life that has been safe and promising. And there's still connections that I have to this day, and I think that, if I ever really needed help, I could call on them. I'm very lucky to have that, though, because a lot of friends that I have even here in Eugene, or people who have graduated, did not have access to that kind of support. And that's scary, because I don't know how I would have done it without them,
Do you feel like Native peoples have a voice in Eugene?
So I think within the U of O community, specifically after the pioneer statues were taken down from a protesting group, I think that had caused the U of O administration to finally listen, to reach out, to engage in discussion. I've spoken with the office of provost. I forget the person's name, but they had invited two of my friends and I from the Native Student Union to just speak what it was like to be a student at U of O. And this is my second year now, and I'm glad that those statues have been taken down. I don't even notice that space anymore, but I remember it being so present. I remember not feeling seen, just kind of defeated, just really needing my friends. And I kept going to the Longhouse, and we always talked about what we were going to do, how we were going to get the administration to listen. But it felt hard, and when they were taken down, it was just a day of celebration. I mean, I would love to see the city of Eugene do something for Native American Heritage Month. This is November, and we have a lot of students and myself. These cultural platforms are created with the intent to branch off to that allyship, to welcome folks to learn, to be educated. Because what we don't want is appropriation, and I think that I see that a lot come around Halloween. We see that in NFL teams with their racist mascots and using Native American imagery as team logos, and that's really harmful. That sends a message that we aren't supposed to be here, just a reminder of, oh yeah, that's right, this country's intent and agenda was to wipe my people out. So the fact that I'm still here, the fact that my friends and I are still here, and I'm wearing this camp dress in this house, like, that speaks volumes. And I think in a way honors the people who were also here before too. It feels like sometimes scary to enter those spaces, but I have to remember that, like, my ancestors are here with me right now, and that gives me strength in any space that I enter. Because there are a lot of our stories that aren't told, and we have a lot of stories that can teach how to plant, about the stars, about math. When you think about the Wampanoag tribe, who welcomed the first settlers of this land, they taught them how to survive harsh winters. And that's the thing about Native people, is we have always been welcoming. We have never we've tried to defend our land, and it sounds like, I mean, just the treaty rights were not honored. So that puts then all that work on us to maintain those treaty rights and correct history and tell the stories that were covered. And I think that just this message that I've always felt like something was wrong with me. I, for a long time, did not like being Native. For a long time, really shut those parts down inside of me, especially graduating from Chemawa and then transitioning to U of O. But that's very wrong. You know, that was the intention way before, when boarding schools tried to assimilate the Native kids and to have them stop speaking their native language. So I remember how powerful it is to, you know, I'm not fluent in Apache, but one of my ways of making sure, you know, my future children, or if I ever become a grandma or, you know, adopt, whatever space I enter, like, I want them to, like, Native people to know how important it is to keep their stories and culture and tradition alive. I think that there's power in that, and also it helps me remember who I am. I can't forget myself. I don't have time to forget myself. Like, I really hang on to my ancestral roots, and it leads me in everything that I decide to do, whether that's college or my career, or just choosing to educate allies and choosing to enter spaces. It's a lot of emotional work, but I love getting to show up and say, like, this is who I am and these are my people, and now how are we going to work together to change it? You know, you've heard my stories, you've heard the pain, and we sat in friendship, and now, like, how are we going to help each other and change it? Because I think there's a lot of things that can be changed. You know, tomorrow is the election day, and who knows what's to come with the upcoming week, but I'm reminded that, okay, like, my people have faced so many things and we are still here, and this election is not going to change that. If anything, we're going to fight harder, and that's just the bottom line, is we've always been resilient, and I feel assured that we're going to be here and take up space and be proud of who we are.
What does voting mean to you?
I recognize that my ancestors did not have the right to vote, and that kind of message is harsh, and it's taking the voice away of my people. It's another form of oppression. When I think of the voting polls that are intentionally set far apart from Native American reservations, and I think of my family, who, one, is so discouraged and would say things like, what difference will I make? What difference will it make, Angela? And that's really hard, to try to get your family to vote and recognize, help them recognize why it's so important, and them to feel so defeated and have witnessed years of oppression and just no change in their communities. I try to be hopeful. You know, I did vote, and I felt very scared. My professors have all asked, you know, students of color, what are our safety plans? And the fact that, you know, we have to come up with safety plans, like, it made me a little anxious. I don't have family out here, so, you know, it made me really scared. And in school, all I learned about is, I think U of O, the classes that they have to offer do really well in just teaching, like, the stats around missing and murdered Indigenous women. And I look at those stats and I think of my sister, I think of the women in my family, and it makes me scared, but I choose to not be afraid about it, and I choose to take a stand. So it was kind of an emotional thing for me when I mailed off my ballot. You know, I just kind of sat with it and just hoping for change. But voting for me means that, like, I'm voting for those who carried my blood, the blood that I'm carrying their blood, and it's filled with strength and resilience, but they didn't have this opportunity. So of course I'm going to vote. Of course I'm going to exercise that right, and I'm going to make sure that never happens again, and hopefully we'll see someone who's Native in the White House one day. That's the goal.
Do you believe we can make systematic change with voting?
Yes, I think that making voting more accessible, especially to Native communities. I think a lot of policies around climate change, climate change has been such a pressing topic that I have seen across news, just gaining national media attention, because I think that, of course, our president devalues it and says that it's not true, but I'm excited for the topic of climate change because it then forces scientists to ask, what has been done before. And Indigenous people have stories, and we have methods. And we look at the California fires that have happened. A lot of scientists have reached out to the tribes in California and asked, how did you maintain these fires? And a lot of leaders in those tribes are then working with, BIA and land managements to teach them what they did to manage those fires. And I think that's a really cool way of connecting because I feel like there's this narrative of like Native people being this thing of the past, but we're scientists and we're doctors and like this is what we look like, A lot of people get so excited about it, but I do not like that because I feel like they just kind of reference us as like outdated or traditional or ancestral when those things all have value and they're all good things, but we're still here. Like, I just want people to know that we're still here. So I think that putting more Natives in positions of power as decision makers, getting them to the tables that are making these decisions for cities or climate change plans, I think that's the way that we can create change. That representation for Native people goes a long way. I really do love Eugene. It's been a really nice place to heal and grow. And I would really love to see Eugene reference and name that this is Kalapuya Alihi territory and that there are still descendants here that live among the land. And I'm looking forward to whatever's to come of this video, of this interview, and I hope that folks do see me as a resource too. I'm here to engage in conversation, and I just ask that you just be respectful, and it's long overdue for an invitation, but we're here and we're ready, and thank you for this time and this opportunity.
You are very welcome. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.